I was about to start with saying that we are going to impact 500 billion of manufacturing sector. And in next 4 years, we will probably, if India was to be a $5 trillion economy, and interesting, I'm always a believer in stats, I think our startup ecosystem will generate $500 billion to that GDP.
If you have to deconstruct, what does it mean to be working in Moglix? What does it mean for the different stakeholders at Moglix?
So I think, let me answer the question firstly, the stakeholders. I mean, being a commerce company, you have customer, supplier, classical marketplace that you are operating. So we operate 28 warehouses across the country, which are our own centers that we operate by ourselves. We work with manufacturing companies. You name a automotive company, whether it is Hero Motocorp, you take any of their ancillaries, you take Maruti, any of their ancillaries, you take a steel manufacturing plant, you take a chemical plant, pharmaceutical plant. I mean, I would be proud to say that we would be associated with Dr. Reddy's if they're building vaccines and other things. So you are kind of having those kind of customers on one end. And what Moglix becomes for most of them is we become their close procurement partner, which is kind of the store for everything that they need to operate their manufacturing plant. They may need a small electrical device, they may need tools, they may need safety gears, they may need sometimes chemicals, all kinds of products. And they just go to Moglix and can buy all of those products versus having to run around and find suppliers and trying to get those delivered. On the supply side, we obviously have built what we are fairly proud of, because India operated pretty much without catalogs pre-Moglix. So I think I can pretty much take the liberty of saying that Moglix is the catalog for India. India does not have a catalog. I mean, like, it's a powerful statement, but I think that is it. I mean, because there is this, and you take some of the global examples, they build books and they make all online catalogs, which are anywhere between 10 million SKUs all the way to 50 million SKUs. There are platforms like that. But in India, with a 500,000 SKUs going to 1 million SKUs, we are the catalog for the country, for all these manufacturing companies. And I think that's, so those two are probably the pieces in terms of thinking about the stakeholders. But I think what COVID has taught me is a very interesting thing we did in wave one, and we've been part of multiple COVID initiatives as well. We shipped PPEs in first wave to 25 countries, supporting them in their COVID fight, whether you name countries like Israel, Brazil, Mexico, Germany, UK, China, when the Chinese were struggling in January and February. So I think you're sitting at the heart of enabling many of those supply chains as a company. But we also realize that in this last 1 year, there is a significant shift in terms of thinking about as a company, because we feel that our stakeholders are far beyond just thinking of customers, suppliers, and employees. I think there is this entire ecosystem which we have a responsibility towards, which is very, very different. I mean, whether it is the startup ecosystem, whether it is our manufacturing ecosystem, employees are no longer limited about thinking about employees, but their families far greater than just getting them insured. And sort of the entire physical and mental well-being of them and their family, and getting access to resources when we might be in crunch of resources. I mean, so I think that whole definition of participating in ACT, Give India, various streams. So I think the whole definition of stakeholder, I think in last 1 year has gone through a significant transformation in my mind of how to holistically, as a entrepreneur, as a company, we want to play whatever role in our capacity we can towards any of these touch points we have as a company.
What was the discussion with Falcon Edge? What was the discussion with Harvard Management Company? And first you have to tell me, what is this Harvard Management Company? Who are they?
So Harvard Management Company is basically Harvard's endowment fund, which is for the business and the entire university. For naming, they call it Harvard Management Company, because and for certain compliance related aspects. So basically it's the endowment fund, I think $40 to $50 billion worth of endowment fund of Harvard that it is there. So
What did
firstly
you
that I
talk?
think. What did I talk? I think I talked about how we are playing a role and into making an impact in manufacturing infrastructure industry today in India, and our business model, technology, supply chain capabilities, attracting talent in 20s and 30s and 40s and making them motivated about manufacturing sector, and how we are going to change the not just India but now globally as a company of we I think we definitely aspire to be, and we might already be the most disruptive company in the manufacturing globally, I would say, at this
Wow.
point in time. I don't think that much innovation has gone into the sector as we are at least attempting as an organization.
What were some of the metrics, if you can tell us, that worked in your favor? Because I don't think so you would have uh, benchmarks, right?
So firstly, I think we don't have a correspondence with respect to the company like Moglix, but we do have, I mean, the entire transactions is happening offline. So it's not like
Hmm.
the transaction. So we are not necessarily creating
Hmm.
a new market. We are creating new ways which can completely change the way buying happens, selling happens, supply chain happens, financing happens. So we are completely changing that ecosystem of multiple things that are happening as part of the commerce transaction.
Hmm.
So I think that is number one. The second thing, I think my conversations, I think it's interesting because Falcon Edge has known us for more than 12 months. I think they wanted to put money. We did our last raise in 2019 when we had Tiger coming in, and we did a $60 million round at that point in time. But I would say the investors had a strong belief in what we are building, and I think we might have the fastest term sheet we ever thought. I mean, from the time we created the deck to the term sheet was 6 days. I mean, like, which is as fast as it can be from a company standpoint. On the Harvard side, I think again it was us. I think they had tracked us for a while, so I think.
Yeah.
It was a belief which was already there, and having seen, I think Harvard particularly sits at a very interesting epicenter in US, because they do see a lot more industrial economy and players than the likes of Stanford and others would probably track. And I think that sort of made them a natural believer, and they're believers in disruptive companies globally, right? So interestingly, we are their first investment in India. So,
Wow.
so I think it was interesting to partner up with a brand name like that.
Then tell us, what does it mean to you today? What has it meant the last 6 years and coming here?
The milestone, I think the biggest thing what it means for me is I've been very, very passionate about manufacturing and infrastructure sector. I mean, we are touching 20% of the country's economy. And when I started with a goal that we are going to bring the same level of convenience, same level of technology, same level of supply chain efficiency, which we see in our consumer world every day, to the B2B world, to this sector. And that is how we will kind of build the infrastructure and capabilities which will be required as a country for next 20, 30, 50 years to become a manufacturing infrastructure powerhouse across the world. So I think this milestone to me is one of those steps in between where you start to feel that you can actually make a dent. I think the dent is far smaller given the size of the sector, but you can start to at least make a small change in the sector, and therefore people realizing that the potential of this impact on the country, on the sector, can be phenomenally high. And I think this milestone to me is actually getting started.
Mm.
Becoming relevant and getting started is how I would visualize this milestone in my mind.
Tell us about the idea and the execution over the last 5-6 years.
So I think it is interesting. I mean, I spent, I would say I would belong to the older generation of entrepreneurs. I started after 15 years of experience, was at Google for 5 years, had a vantage point where I saw companies like Alibaba, all the consumer commerce companies, travel companies. And then I had a unique perspective because I grew up in Faridabad, which was like the manufacturing hub for India for in 70s and 80s, family of engineers, so on and so forth. And I think the interesting thing as I started my entrepreneurship journey was, am I able to bring the impact of what I've learned in technology, advertising, all roaming around the world into something that is very, very core to the country and the economy. And I think that's how the pieces started to come together as I started my journey. And actually the starting statement was, we'll build Alibaba 2.0 from India for B2B commerce sector. I think that's pretty much the goal we started. And I think it was interesting because, and you are in the thick end of the entire startup industry and driving a massive impact, I know. 2015, if I was to come to you and say that I'm building something in B2B manufacturing, it would be like, what the hell, Rahul, you're wasting your time. I mean, like, there is so much else that is happening. But I think that gave us sort of that creative freedom, which many entrepreneurs sometimes do not get when they are catching to the wave. Because we traveled to 10 countries. We understood those for 1 year. We were just traveling. We were talking to customers, talking to suppliers, coming up with our own thesis on what the world should look like. How is it today? All of those. And I think you don't get sometimes those luxury 1 year when you can actually go deeper and kind of into a sector and build your own thesis. So I think that was phenomenal. And we launched in 2016. Then we got lucky, I would say also. And I think maybe some of the entrepreneurs get lucky. I think the GST transformation that happened for the country in 2017 fundamentally changed the landscape of how businesses would transact with each other for the future. And this like once in a lifetime. So I think good thing is we started 2 years ahead, not knowing our prime minister will actually make that change happen. But we got benefited by that change, which was long overdue, I would say, for the economy and for the supply chains in B2B. So I think then it was never looking back. I think you could scale as a company.
We need a lot more efficiency in manufacturing. Manufacturing has to grow in our country. And that brings me to the question of your acquisition. When that's so, it's, I read that it is used machinery commerce platform. Tell us, and then what got you to acquire them now?
So I think the way we are positioned as a company, we believe that we will have to go out and build the entire ecosystem of services that are required for the industry. And it's hard to cross that initial cliff, and it's hard to scale. It's very, very hard. I mean, we have had, I think, enough mortalities of companies with double-digit $1 million raised, shut down, bought out, all kinds of combinations. So I think when we found this company, we felt this is a problem many of the companies encounter, and it's like dead inventory lying into their stores, and after a few years it's just like junk, right? So I think as we are building this ecosystem, I think you will see more of this. I think quite a few things that we did. We announced Credlex a few months back, where we said we are going to enable supply chain financing for the ecosystem of the suppliers in the manufacturing sector. This is another service that our customers need. I think we are continuing to go add more and more services, which will make the sector more efficient and more scalable, I would say.
What are your plans to expand globally? You said that for the PPE kit, you went to 25 countries. You supplied to 25 countries. Are you planning to expand what you're doing here to different geographies?
We are definitely working very, very closely on that. I think the travel has put a little bit, I would say, speed bumps to expand faster than we would like to. I mean, we are a Singapore headquartered company. The funny thing is we have not been able to travel there for the last 15 months, right? So, I mean, last time I was there was in January 20. So I would say that there is speed bumps of travel, but I think we are almost there. We'll start to have something come out very, very shortly in terms of starting to have full-fledged launch of Moglix in a couple of countries, and then continuing to expand from there.
What does Moglix mean?
So I think naming a company is like more difficult or equally difficult as naming two kids I had. It's the same difficulty and choice, because you have to just then live with it, right? So for me, it was a equally challenging thing. But I think I was always inspired to build it as a brand. Alibaba, Amazon, Google. I mean, many of these companies have gone about build a brand, and I've always been sort of inspired with that sort of a thought process. I think one of those moments, I think I decided Mowgli will be my brand. So I named the company as Mowgli Labs Private Limited, and Moglix became that domain, and which represents very well the infinite ambition for us as a company in a global sense. So I would say that's how Moglix was born.
Yeah.
The maverick Moglix who has to survive the hostilities of a jungle, and our first investor was also excellent jungle. So we used to joke about Mowgli needs the support of jungle to survive and thrive, and so on and so forth. So I think and I think startup journey is like that. I mean, startup journey is like Mowgli. I mean, like um, uh, I sometimes use office room. I mean, that's called Mowgli. So every office has a Mowgli room, and most of our conference rooms are like that.
How are you building the company internally?
So I feel it's very, very important that I think we are kind of in this second or third wave of companies that are being built in India. Uh, and I think it is very, very important that you start to create wealth for people, but also a significant amount of trust and partnership. And I think it is interesting in that sense. So I'm going to answer the ESOP question first, and creating wealth for people and creating ownership for people in the organization. I started as a single founder. So I think I built a strong leadership around me early days, and then we have stuck around with each other, and then we continue to expand the leadership. So I think the fundamental construct that which we are building the organization is all about trust, is all about being together. It's like uh, I mean, there's so much I would say similarities how you go about building your flock, and so on and so forth, and how do you fight together and build it out, right? So and I think that requires that skin in the game, long-term thinking. And I think the ESOPs have to be a fantastic tool of creating that, because as a startup, which is kind of still relying on venture capital, we are fairly capital efficient, but we still are raising venture capital, and we are still not fully break even. This is the moment, and this is the way for people to generate wealth, stick around, build something that they are super excited about. I think there are quite a few hacks we have done in ESOP for the probably audience that may be interesting. I think one of the early things has been about how do you sort of build a ESOP policy, which is so our ESOP policy mostly looks like RSUs. So that is one very important element of how do you create wealth. So it is 85% RSU. That's I think one of the hacks that we have done. We can't put a strike price of 0, but we said it should always be priced at 85% discounting, and we always calculate it using that. The second element that we have gone and done is how do you sort of retain stock options if you were to quit an organization, and what is the tax implication? How do you solve for some of the demands that the startup industry has been having every time the budget session comes up? Or can we not tax at the exercise point, but at the liquidity point? So we have designed for that, so that people do not have to worry about it. I mean, it still means that whenever the liquidity event is there, they still get exposed to the short-term capital gain instead of the long-term capital gain, which is like, but it is still better than at least the element if they were at the point.
When liquidity is there, then it doesn't matter, right? You can pay, but you didn't pay when the liquidity is not there. Yeah,
that is absolutely, but they end up paying like 30%. I mean, like, I feel that they should be having access to the long-term capital gain, because that would be the ideal thing. But still, I think it's better than what most companies will be able to do. So we designed for that from early days. We've always been designing a uniform with every vesting. It's like a 25% into 4. We have been looking at stock as one of the elements that we refresh every year based on performance. So it's not a one-time grant. People look at it as a performance. It's in fact something that they should look forward to more when the appraisal cycle happens. And I would say that's how. I mean, our stock today covers more than 300 plus people in the organization. It runs into several hundred crores now as a company.
Wow.
So that's the value. We have made it liquid for last 2 years, by the way. So it's also
Wow.
interesting that it's almost like a blank check we have written to people that we do fix price at the points of fundraise and so on and so forth. But if they have a scenario of family, if they have different people have different capital needs, so on and so forth, if they want to, they have a door open, and if we are able to, we will do that. And anyways, we have done these structural liquidity events both in 2019 and this time as well. So we continue to do that. I mean, so people start to see this is not paper money, this is actually real money. I mean, and it's gratifying as a founder, because I feel that quite a few of my leaders can actually retire now. I mean, like, but they're passionate. I mean, like, that we want to change this. I mean, like, but you see people moving into buying houses and early 30s, they don't carry any financial insecurities as we would be when we were in those age profiles and things like that. And I think it's a phenomenal feel for me as an entrepreneur.
I can understand what it means to be a single founder, but पता है इन्वेस्टर्स कहते हैं कि नहीं 2-3 फाउंडर होने चाहिए, सिंगल नहीं। और ये स्टार्टअप इकोसिस्टम में बहुत बड़ा डिबेट रहता है कि कैसे करें, सिंगल फाउंडर्स के लिए डिसएडवांटेज है। And today you are a unicorn, so you tell us कि क्या है?
So I think what happens is when you have a early evolution of a startup ecosystem, there are a lot of templates and copy paste that people do.
हाँ.
I think which is a problem. And I think there are two stereotypes which we have to completely give up if I was to encourage the entrepreneurs. Firstly, anybody comes with axiom, do not listen to those people, because we should operate on theorems, we should not work on axioms in life. Okay, because the person who came and told you this has no sort of, most scenarios, or 90% of people who come and tell you that statement have no clue why that statement has to be told to people. Okay. The second thing the second thing is we are a very first principle organization. So I'm a 3 times failed entrepreneur, failed to start entrepreneur before I started the company, and all the 3 times was with co-founders. So when I was starting Moglix, it was very simple. And the statement which we have from one of our historical big figures is Akla chalo re, and you will, if you are on the right direction, if you have the right intention, people will come along.
Absolutely.
And it will be formed. I think the question becomes is, are you short-term oriented, long-term oriented? Do you have, and I think particularly if you're starting a company after maybe 10, 15 years, I think you know how to build organization. You know quite a few skills. If I was starting at 22, when I was actually having limited skills exposure, I think co-founders is a way to augment skills which you do not have. And therefore, I think this entire segmentation changes with age, changes with experience, changes with, like, would I want to have a co-founder who, for the namesake, is a co-founder, but actually I do not look at him as a co-founder, and therefore equities are very different. I mean, all of those parameters are very important to consider, and it's very contextual. And would I be able to find a perfect person at when I was starting? I had 2 kids. I mean, was moving from Singapore to India, who I would look up to, who's passionate about manufacturing like the way I am. I mean, what are the odds of getting such a co-founder? So then you have to go do your own thing and hopefully get people who are as co-founder as they can be, I would say.
अगर 1-2 साल में कहाँ और पहुंचना है, एंड ऑल्सो कॉन्टेक्स्ट में कि इंडिया को अगर मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में और अच्छा करना है, बड़ा करना है, तो क्या कर सकते हैं? व्हाट शुड वी बी डूइंग एज अ कंट्री, एंड वेयर डू यू सी मोग्लिक्स pan out or shape that narrative or that journey of India being a manufacturing hub?
So I think 2 parts to the question. So one is, I think we are very passionate about the sector. So any scheme, whether it is the PLI scheme of electronics manufacturer, I've been an electronics manufacturer, getting more semiconductor manufacturing in India, so we play, as I said, stakeholder, we play to the ecosystem as much as we play to building the company. I think so. We are going to continue to do all our efforts into how does the industry grow. Now, whether it grows by bringing efficiencies, whether it grows by creating enough buzz so that people start to invest more into manufacturing, more talent starts to come into the industry, more exports happen. We are going to play all levers that we can as an organization and try to play with the ecosystem as much as possible. We are part of CII, different initiatives. We are trying to bring the startup thinking, speed thinking, scale thinking into many of those. I mean, sometimes our teams are probably the youngest team that will show up on most of these platforms and most passionate advocates of what we could be doing at scale and thinking with speed. I think what COVID has enabled is an additional, I would say, almost a responsibility for all of us that we have to make it happen.
Yeah.
I mean, there is maybe if the world was not so geopolitically conflicted and scenarios which can lead to defense related implications, protecting our citizens, all of those, I think we may not have woken up to this fact that this is no longer a sort of an economic choice or that kind of principle. This is a choice of country defense, choice of country building. I mean, there can be a vaccine producer in the world who can ask for indemnity of your entire government assets if you do not build a vaccine which is indigenous. That is how bad it can be. I mean, there can be similar such 10 scenarios that I can articulate. I mean, like mobile phones. I mean, like, what do? Will you sort of shut down the country from a communications technology perspective if you do not build that capabilities and you are at potential political conflicts with any of those countries? So I would say this is like as close as to do or die for us as a country to step up and do this. And we will do all out our own endeavors to make this happen. And we believe, I mean, Moglix can be 100x. I truly believe we are just getting started. I think we can be 100x, not just for India, but for many of the countries who also maybe subscale and do not know how to develop some of these capabilities, partnerships, what India is still able to do. I know countries which will not even have the capabilities that India has today. But for the size of population, we need more capabilities. Those countries need support. They need alternate support, which is more democracy, built on philosophy. So I think I can go on and on. I think we just got to do it. And we will probably build Moglix 200x. We will continue our endeavors to get this sector to become a pillar stone of building a $5 trillion economy. My ambition is that I would want to see India to a $10 trillion economy over the next 10 years. But let's see how far we go as a country. It's a collective effort of all of us working on it.
Thank you. Very, very inspiring. And we'll be rooting for Moglix and look forward to the journey that you make and to more conversations. Thank you.